The desert air hung thick with tension as Captain Sarah Chen pressed herself against the crumbling wall of what used to be a schoolhouse. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out everything except the sporadic crack of enemy fire that had pinned down her entire platoon. 23 Marines, trapped in a killbox in the outskirts of Ramadi, with nowhere to go and reinforcements at least 40 minutes out. The sun beat down mercilessly on the Iraqi wasteland, turning their gear into furnaces and their throats into sandpaper. She could see the fear in her Marine's eyes, not the kind that makes you freeze, but the kind that tells you everyone knows the math doesn't add up in your favor. "Captain, we've got movement on the north rooftop," Corporal Davis hissed from her right, his rifle trained on a building 300 meters out. Sarah shifted her position, bringing her own weapon up, scanning through the scope. She saw them, at least 6 insurgents, maybe more, positioned perfectly to cut down anyone who tried to make a break for the vehicles they'd abandoned in the street. This was supposed to be a routine patrol, a quick sweep through a sector that intelligence had marked as clear. Intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." The ambush had come out of nowhere. One moment they were moving through the narrow streets, checking doorways and windows with the practiced efficiency of a unit that had been together for 8 months. The next moment, the world exploded. The lead Humvee had been disabled by an IED, improvised explosive device, and before they could react, automatic weapons fire had erupted from at least 3 different positions. They'd made it to cover, but just barely. Lance Corporal Martinez had taken shrapnel to the leg, and Sergeant Williams was working frantically to keep him stable while bullets chipped away at their protection inch by inch. Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Viper 6, this is Overwatch. We've got your position. Be advised, enemy forces estimated at 15 to 20 combatants, with possible reinforcements moving in from the east. Your orders are to hold position and wait for QRF." The quick reaction force was their lifeline, but 40 minutes might as well have been 40 hours given their current situation. She could already see their ammunition situation becoming critical, and Martinez needed a medevac sooner rather than later. "Overwatch, Viper 6. We're taking effective fire from multiple positions. Request immediate air support, over." Sarah kept her voice steady, professional, even though every instinct was screaming at her to find a way out of this death trap. The response came back crackling with static and something that sounded like reluctance. "Viper 6, negative on air support. Birds are committed elsewhere. You need to hold your position. Reinforcements inbound, ETA 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Sarah closed her eyes for just a second, running through scenarios in her mind. Every option led to casualties. They could try to fight their way to the vehicles, but they'd lose at least half the platoon crossing that open ground. They could wait it out, but the enemy knew they were pinned and would be bringing up heavier weapons. She'd been in tough spots before, but this one had a particular flavor of hopelessness that she didn't like at all. Then something changed. The pattern of enemy fire that had been so consistent, so overwhelming, suddenly faltered. Sarah heard it first, a different sound, a crack that echoed differently across the urban landscape. One of the insurgents on the northern rooftop dropped, his weapon clattering down to the street below. Before she could process what had happened, another one fell. Then a third. The remaining fighters on that position scrambled for cover, their disciplined firing positions abandoned in sudden panic. "What the hell?" Corporal Davis breathed beside her. "Captain, who's shooting?" Sarah was scanning the horizon, trying to locate the source of this unexpected intervention. The shots were precise, methodical, and they were definitely not coming from any of her Marines. Another insurgent position went silent, this one to the east, where 2 fighters had been laying down suppressive fire from behind a burned-out car. 1 shot, 1 kill. Then another. The precision was surgical, almost unnatural. Her radio hissed again, but this time it wasn't Overwatch. The voice was female, calm, with an edge that suggested this wasn't her first rodeo. "Viper 6, keep your heads down and stay put. I've got Overwatch." The transmission ended before Sarah could respond. She exchanged glances with Davis, whose expression mirrored her own confusion. That voice wasn't on their frequency, shouldn't have been able to access their comms, and definitely wasn't part of the mission roster. Who the hell was that? Davis asked, but Sarah was already moving, repositioning to get a better view of the battlefield. The enemy fire had decreased by at least 60%, and the remaining insurgents were clearly confused, trying to figure out where this new threat was coming from. Another shot rang out, and another fighter dropped. This time Sarah caught a glimpse, a muzzle flash from a position at least 800 meters out, on top of a minaret that overlooked the entire sector. That was an impossible shot with iron sights, difficult even with the best equipment. Whoever was up there was operating on a completely different level. The mysterious sniper continued her deadly work with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Every 8 to 12 seconds, another shot. Every shot, another enemy combatant eliminated or forced into cover so deep they were effectively neutralized. Sarah watched in amazement as the tactical situation transformed before her eyes. What had been a hopeless killbox was becoming a shooting gallery, with her platoon as the protected spectators and an unknown guardian angel as the executioner. Viper 6, Overwatch. We're seeing a significant change in enemy disposition. Can you confirm you have friendly sniper support in your AO? The question from headquarters made Sarah realize just how irregular this situation was. She keyed her radio, choosing her words carefully. Overwatch, Viper 6. Negative on confirmed friendly support. We have unknown shooter engaging enemy positions with extreme prejudice. Effective fire, suppressing enemy and creating window for movement. There was a pause, longer than Sarah liked. When Overwatch came back, there was tension in the voice. Viper 6, be advised, we have no assets in your sector. Repeat, no authorized friendly forces in sniper positions. Recommend you maintain defensive posture and identify shooter. Sarah felt a chill despite the 100-degree heat. No authorized forces. That meant whoever was saving their lives was operating outside the chain of command, possibly even against orders. All Viper elements, this is 6, Sarah transmitted to her platoon. We've got unknown support but we're using it. Prepare to move on my command. We're getting Martinez to the vehicles and getting the hell out of here. Her Marines acknowledged with hand signals and whispered confirmations. Whatever questions they had about their mysterious benefactor could wait until they were out of immediate danger. The priority now was exploiting this window while it lasted. The female voice crackled through Sarah's radio again, and this time there was a hint of urgency. Viper 6, you've got approximately 90 seconds before enemy reinforcements arrive from the east. 3 technical trucks with mounted weapons. I can slow them down but you need to move now. The statement was delivered with absolute certainty, as if the speaker was reading from a script rather than making an educated guess. Sarah didn't question it. She'd learned early in her career that when someone with better information gives you advice in a firefight, you take it. Viper elements, move now. Covering fire on northern positions, displacement to vehicles in 3-second rushes. Go, go, go. Sarah's command unleashed controlled chaos as her Marines executed the movement drill they'd practiced 100 times. Corporal Davis and his fire team laid down suppressive fire while Sergeant Williams and 2 others carried Martinez toward the abandoned Humvees. The enemy fire that should have cut them down never materialized. Every time an insurgent tried to re-engage, that precise crack from the minaret sent them ducking back into cover or tumbling from their positions. Sarah was moving with the second wave when she saw them, the technical trucks the mystery sniper had warned about, racing down the eastern approach road in a cloud of dust. Mounted on each truck bed was a heavy machine gun, the kind that could shred their Humvees like tissue paper. Her heart sank. Even with their guardian angel, those guns would turn the tide decisively against them. She opened her mouth to warn her Marines, but the words never came. The lead technical exploded. Not from an airstrike or a missile, the sound was wrong for that. It took Sarah a moment to process what had happened. The sniper had shot the driver through the windshield at a range that had to be over 1,000 meters, sending the vehicle careening into a concrete barrier where it erupted in flames. The second technical swerved to avoid the wreck, and in doing so, exposed its driver for maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds was enough. Another shot, another dead driver, another vehicle out of commission. The third technical slammed on its brakes, the gunner jumping out and running for cover rather than face the invisible death dealing from somewhere in the urban landscape. Jesus Christ, Davis breathed as he slid into cover next to Sarah, having made the crossing successfully. Captain, whoever that is, they're not human. Those shots are impossible. Sarah nodded, because she was thinking the same thing. The distance, the precision, the timing, it all spoke to a level of skill that went beyond exceptional and entered the realm of legendary. She'd heard stories, of course. Every unit had legends about ghost snipers, about shooters who operated alone, who ignored orders and showed up when things were at their worst. She'd always dismissed those stories as combat mythology, the kind of tales soldiers told to feel better about the chaos they lived through. But now, with enemy bodies littering the rooftops and her Marines making it to the vehicles alive, Sarah was ready to believe in ghosts. Her radio crackled one more time. Viper 6, you're clear to move. Get your people out of here. And Captain? The voice paused, and Sarah found herself holding her breath. Tell Overwatch that Sergeant Kira Donovan sends her regards. They'll know who I am. The transmission ended with a click that felt like a door closing. Sarah wanted to respond, wanted to demand answers, wanted to know who this woman was and why she just saved 23 Marines from certain death while apparently defying direct orders. But there was no time. Martinez needed medical attention, her platoon needed to get clear of the kill zone, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear sirens and the rumble of what might be more enemy reinforcements or might be their own QRF finally arriving. The ride back to base was a blur of adrenaline crash and confusion. Sarah sat in the lead Humvee, her rifle across her lap, staring at the radio as if it might spontaneously offer explanations. Sergeant Williams had Martinez stabilized in the vehicle behind them. An initial assessment suggested the shrapnel wounds were serious but not life-threatening. They'd gotten lucky. No, Sarah corrected herself mentally, luck had nothing to do with it. They'd been saved. Deliberately, methodically, impossibly saved by someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Captain, you going to tell me what the hell just happened back there? Corporal Davis was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for pursuit that never came. Sarah shook her head slowly. I don't know, Davis. I genuinely don't know. But I intend to find out. The name echoed in her mind, Sergeant Kira Donovan. She'd heard that name before, she was certain of it, but the context eluded her. It lingered at the edge of memory like a word on the tip of your tongue. When they rolled through the base gates, there was already a reception committee waiting. Not the usual combination of relief and routine debriefing, but something more formal, more tense. A colonel Sarah didn't recognize stood near the command post, along with 2 figures in civilian clothes that had intelligence written all over them. Her company commander, Major Peterson, looked simultaneously relieved to see them and deeply uncomfortable about whatever was about to happen. Captain Chen, glad to see you made it back, Peterson said as Sarah dismounted, her legs shaky from the adrenaline dump. We need to debrief immediately. And I mean immediately. Colonel Morrison wants to speak with you before you talk to anyone else. The Major's expression carried a warning that Sarah understood instantly. Whatever she'd stumbled into with this mysterious sniper, it was above her pay grade and probably classified at levels she'd never dreamed of accessing. The debriefing room was cold, aggressively air-conditioned to counter the desert heat, and Sarah found herself shivering despite having just come from temperatures that could fry an egg on metal. Colonel Morrison was a stern-looking man in his 50s, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen too much and been disappointed by most of it. The 2 civilians, one male, one female, both wearing expressions of careful neutrality, took seats but said nothing. Peterson stood by the door like a guard, though whether he was keeping people out or keeping Sarah in, she couldn't tell. Captain Chen, I need you to tell me everything that happened during your patrol, with particular emphasis on the engagement in Sector 7 Charlie. Morrison's voice was flat, professional, giving nothing away. Sarah took a breath and began recounting the ambush, the impossibility of their tactical situation, and then the intervention. When she got to the part about the radio transmission and the name Kira Donovan, she saw something flicker across Morrison's face. It was gone in an instant, replaced by that same neutral mask, but it had been there. Recognition. Concern. Maybe anger. "You're certain of the name?" the female civilian asked, speaking for the first time. Her accent was East Coast, educated, and carried an authority that suggested she was used to being obeyed. Sarah nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. Sergeant Kira Donovan." She said to tell Overwatch, said they'd know who she was. The civilian exchanged a glance with her partner, and in that silent communication, Sarah saw an entire conversation happen. This was bigger than she thought. Much bigger. Morrison leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, he looked tired. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified. You will not discuss this with your Marines, with your fellow officers, or with anyone else without explicit authorization. Am I clear?" Sarah straightened in her chair. "Crystal clear, sir." She'd been through this dance before, knew the ritual of compartmentalization. In the military, some stories stayed locked in vaults, and the key was kept by people whose names you'd never know. Sergeant Kira Donovan was one of the most gifted snipers the Marine Corps has ever produced, Morrison began, his words careful and measured. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, confirmed kill count in the triple digits. She has a gift that borders on supernatural, spatial awareness, wind reading, distance calculation. She could make shots that other snipers wouldn't even attempt. But 8 months ago, Sergeant Donovan received orders to stand down from a mission. Intel had indicated high civilian presence in a target area, and command made the call to abort. The colonel paused, and Sarah could sense the weight of what was coming next. Donovan disagreed with the assessment. She maintained that the intelligence was wrong, that the targets were legitimate combatants disguised as civilians. She was ordered explicitly to withdraw and return to base. She refused. She took the shots anyway. Killed 6 insurgents, including a high-value target we'd been hunting for months. Turns out she was right, they were combatants, they were planning an attack on a refugee center. But she disobeyed a direct order. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sarah felt her stomach drop. In the military, being right didn't matter if you'd violated the chain of command. The order was the order, no matter how wrong it might be. What happened to her, she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Morrison's expression darkened. Court-martialed. Dishonorable discharge. Stripped of rank and benefits. The brass made an example of her, sent a message that no one, no matter how skilled, was above following orders. She disappeared after that, dropped off the grid completely. Until today, apparently. The revelation hung in the air like smoke after a firefight. Sarah tried to process what she'd just learned, that the woman who had saved her entire platoon was a disgraced former Marine, someone who'd been cast out for the very thing that made her exceptional. The irony wasn't lost on her. Kira Donovan had been punished for disobeying orders to save lives, and now she was out here doing it again, operating in the shadows without authorization, without support, without anyone to watch her back. "Sir, with all due respect," Sarah began, choosing her words carefully, "Sergeant Donovan just saved 23 Marines. Whatever happened in her past, whatever orders she violated, she put herself at risk today to pull us out of an impossible situation. Doesn't that count for something?" The female civilian leaned forward, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Captain Chen, the issue isn't whether Donovan's actions today were heroic. The issue is that she's operating in a combat zone without authorization, using skills she acquired as a United States Marine in a capacity that we cannot control, predict, or account for. She's a loose cannon, no matter how well-intentioned." Sarah felt anger flare in her chest but kept her expression neutral. A loose cannon that just eliminated at least 15 enemy combatants and disrupted an ambush that would have required significant air support to counter. If she hadn't been there, I'd be writing letters to families right now instead of sitting in this room. Morrison raised a hand, cutting off the civilian's response. "Captain, no one is disputing the outcome. But understand this, Donovan is being hunted. Not by the enemy, by our own people. She's been operating in this region for at least 3 months that we know of, maybe longer. Ghost engagements, unexplained enemy casualties, missions that succeed when they shouldn't. We've been tracking the pattern, but she's always gone before we can locate her." "Why?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Why are we hunting someone who's clearly on our side, who's saving American lives?" The male civilian spoke for the first time, his voice cold and bureaucratic. "Because she represents a failure of military discipline, Captain. Because if word gets out that a discharged Marine is operating with impunity in a war zone, it undermines the entire command structure. Soldiers need to believe that orders matter, that the chain of command serves a purpose. Donovan's very existence challenges that fundamental principle." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to point out that principles didn't mean much when you were bleeding out in the Iraqi desert, but she held her tongue. She understood the political reality, even if she disagreed with it. The military ran on order and discipline, and someone like Kira Donovan, talented, effective, but unwilling to play by the rules, was a threat to that order. The fact that she was also right, that her instincts were saving lives, was almost beside the point in the calculus of military politics. "What do you want from me, sir?" Sarah asked Morrison, keeping her tone respectful but direct. The colonel studied her for a long moment before responding. "We want you to help us find her. You've had direct contact, she communicated with you specifically. If she reaches out again, we need to know immediately. And Captain, I want to be clear, the orders are to bring her in alive, to get her out of the field before she gets herself killed or causes an international incident. This isn't a manhunt, it's a recovery operation." Sarah nodded slowly, but inside she was already making calculations. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. If Donovan had wanted to disappear, to live quietly somewhere far from the war, she could have. Instead, she was here, in one of the most dangerous places on Earth, using her skills to protect Marines who didn't even know she existed. That wasn't the behavior of someone who'd given up on the Corps, who'd turned her back on everything she'd believed in. That was the behavior of someone still fighting, still serving, just without the uniform and the official approval. "Understood, sir. If she contacts me again, you'll be the first to know," Sarah said, and she only felt a little guilty about the mental reservation she was making. If Kira Donovan reached out, Sarah would listen to what she had to say before deciding what to report. She owed the woman that much, owed her the chance to explain why a disgraced sergeant was still out here putting her life on the line for people who'd abandoned her. The debriefing continued for another hour, covering every detail of the engagement, every word of the radio transmissions, every shot Sarah had witnessed. The civilians took extensive notes, asked pointed questions about distance, angles, and timing. They were building a profile, Sarah realized, trying to predict where Donovan might be, where she might strike next. It made her feel like a traitor, providing information that would be used against the woman who'd saved her life, but she had no choice. Refusing would raise suspicions, and that wouldn't help anyone. When they finally released her, Sarah stepped out into the evening heat and took a deep breath. The sun was setting over the base, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her uncomfortably of fire and blood. Corporal Davis was waiting near the barracks, along with several other members of her platoon. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern, clearly aware that something unusual was happening but not privy to the details. "Captain, is it true?" Davis asked quietly. "Is it true that we got saved by a ghost?" Sarah almost smiled at the phrasing. A ghost. Maybe that's exactly what Kira Donovan had become, a specter haunting the battlefield, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, operating outside the rules because the rules had failed her. "I don't believe in ghosts, Corporal," Sarah said carefully. "But I do believe in Marines who have each other's backs, no matter what. Get some rest. Tomorrow we're back on patrol." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling of her quarters, replaying the firefight over and over in her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that muzzle flash from the minaret, saw the impossible precision of shots taken at ranges that pushed the limits of what was physically possible. She'd been a Marine for 7 years, had worked with some of the best shooters in the Corps, and she'd never seen anything like what Kira Donovan had done today. At 0200 hours, she gave up on sleep and made her way to the operations center. The night shift was quiet, just a skeleton crew monitoring radio traffic and surveillance feeds. Sarah logged into a computer terminal, using her security clearance to access personnel records. She knew it was probably being monitored, knew that the intelligence types would see that she was searching for information on Donovan, but she didn't care. She needed to understand who this woman was, what had driven her to become both hero and outcast. The file was extensive but heavily redacted. Sarah could see the outline of an exceptional career, marksman qualifications at the top percentiles, commendations for valor, recommendations for specialized sniper training from multiple superior officers. There were deployment records showing back-to-back tours with minimal downtime, the kind of operational tempo that burned most people out but that Donovan seemed to thrive in. And then there were the kill confirmations, page after page of them, each one documented with clinical precision. Date, location, target description, range, conditions. It read like a textbook in applied lethality. But what caught Sarah's attention were the personal notes, the things that hadn't been fully redacted. A recommendation from Donovan's platoon commander that described her as fiercely protective of her unit, sometimes to the point of insubordination. A psychological evaluation that noted, subject displays exceptional stress tolerance but struggles with authority when she believes orders compromise mission success or friendly force safety. A letter of reprimand from a colonel who'd written, Sergeant Donovan is the best shooter I've ever seen, but she thinks she's smarter than everyone else, including her commanding officers. This will be a problem. They'd seen it coming, Sarah realized. The court-martial, the discharge, the fall from grace, it had been predictable based on who Kira Donovan was fundamentally. She was someone who valued results over process, who trusted her own judgment over institutional wisdom, who couldn't watch people die when she had the ability to prevent it, regardless of what orders said. In a perfect world, those qualities would make her a hero. In the real world, they made her a liability. Sarah found a photograph attached to the file, taken during Donovan's advanced sniper training. The woman looking back at the camera was probably in her mid-20s, with sharp features, dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and eyes that seemed to stare through the lens rather than at it. There was an intensity there, a focus that suggested someone who saw the world differently than most people, who calculated angles and distances and wind speeds even when she wasn't behind a scope. It was the face of someone built for exactly one thing, and who'd been punished for being too good at it. Couldn't sleep either, Captain? The voice made Sarah jump. She turned to find Major Peterson standing behind her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one, then pulled up a chair beside her terminal. I figured you'd be doing this. I did the same thing when I first heard about Donovan, must have been about 2 years ago. Wanted to know who this legendary ghost sniper was before she became a ghost. Sarah took the coffee gratefully. Did you ever meet her, sir? Peterson shook his head. No, but I knew people who served with her. Every single one of them said the same thing, that she was the Marine they wanted watching their back, that she could see things on the battlefield that nobody else could see, that she saved their lives more times than they could count. And every single one of them also said that she was impossible to command, that she'd argue with orders if she thought they were wrong, that she operated on her own timeline. So what happened? Sarah asked, even though she already knew the broad strokes. Peterson sighed, staring into his coffee. What always happens when someone's too good and too stubborn? She pushed too hard, bucked one too many orders, and when she finally disobeyed at a moment that couldn't be swept under the rug, they made an example of her. The brass wanted to send a message: no one is indispensable, no one is above the chain of command. They got their message across, all right. Cost them the best sniper in the Corps, but they got their message across. The Major paused, then looked at Sarah directly. I know what Morrison told you, about helping to bring her in. I'm going to give you some advice that could get me in trouble if you repeat it. If Donovan contacts you again, think very carefully about what you report and when. That woman saved your platoon today, saved 23 Marines who would have died without her intervention. Whatever you owe the brass, whatever loyalty you have to the chain of command, remember that you owe her something too. Sarah felt a weight lift slightly. She wasn't alone in her conflicted feelings about this situation. Sir, why is she still here? Why is she still fighting? She could be anywhere in the world, living a quiet life, and instead she's in one of the most dangerous places on the planet, operating alone without support or backup. What's driving her? Peterson smiled sadly. Because she's still a Marine, Captain. They took her rank, her benefits, her career, but they couldn't take that away from her. She's still a Marine, and Marines don't leave their people behind. Even when their people have left them behind. The next morning brought new orders, as Sarah had known it would. Her platoon was being reassigned to convoy escort duty, moving supplies through sectors that intelligence had flagged as moderate threat. It was the kind of assignment that should have felt routine, almost boring compared to the intensity of yesterday's firefight. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, that the encounter with Kiera Donovan was just the beginning of something larger. As her Marines loaded up the Humvees, checking weapons and communication gear with practiced efficiency, Sarah noticed Corporal Davis approaching with an unusual expression, half curiosity, half concern. Captain, got something weird from intel this morning. They're saying there's been an uptick in what they're calling unexplained enemy casualties in our operational area over the past 3 months. Patterns suggesting a lone sniper, taking out high-value targets and disrupting enemy operations. No claimed responsibility, no warning, just bodies turning up with precision headshots from extreme range. Sarah kept her expression neutral, even though her mind was racing. 3 months. Kiera Donovan had been operating in this area for at least 3 months, ghosting through the war zone like a phantom, protecting Marines who never knew she was there. How many lives had she saved in that time? How many ambushes had she disrupted? How many firefights had she tipped in favor of American forces without anyone realizing what was happening? Intel have any idea who's responsible? Sarah asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear Davis say it. They're being cagey about it, ma'am. But the word is it's that ghost sniper from yesterday, the one who pulled our asses out of the fire. Some of the guys are already treating her like she's some kind of guardian angel, like she's watching over us. Davis paused, then added quietly, Captain, is it true they want to bring her in? That she's wanted by our own people? Sarah chose her words carefully. What I know is that she's an unauthorized combatant operating in a war zone, and that creates complications for command. But I also know that she saved every one of us yesterday, and that counts for something in my book. Beyond that, Corporal, I can't say much. And neither should you. Let's focus on the mission ahead and keep our people safe. Davis nodded, understanding the subtext. Don't spread rumors, don't ask questions you don't want answered, and above all, don't make this situation more complicated than it already was. The convoy rolled out at 0900, 4 Humvees carrying supplies and personnel along a route that should have taken 3 hours. Sarah rode in the second vehicle, her rifle ready, her eyes constantly scanning the landscape. The Iraqi countryside rolled past, burnt-out buildings, abandoned vehicles, occasional clusters of civilians who watched the convoy pass with expressions ranging from hostile to indifferent. This was what war looked like when it wasn't actively trying to kill you, Sarah thought. Just poverty and suspicion and the constant underlying threat of violence. They were 90 minutes into the route when Sarah's radio crackled with a transmission that made her sit bolt upright. It was that voice again, the one from yesterday, calm and controlled despite what she was saying. Viper 6, this is Phantom. You've got an ambush forming approximately 2 clicks ahead, east side of the road. 3 vehicles, RPGs, and automatic weapons. Recommend you halt convoy and let me clear the path. Sarah's mind raced. Phantom, so Donovan was using a call sign now, acknowledging what she'd become. A ghost, a phantom, something that existed between the official world and the shadows. Phantom, Viper 6. How do you have this intel? Even as she asked, Sarah was signaling the convoy to halt, trusting the warning even though protocol said she should verify through official channels first. Viper 6, I've been tracking enemy movement patterns in this sector for 2 months. I know their staging areas, their tactics, their timing. Trust me or don't, but those Marines in your convoy will die if you keep moving forward. Sarah made the call. All Viper elements, halt convoy, defensive positions. Possible hostile contact ahead. Her Marines reacted immediately, their training overriding any questions they might have had about why they were stopping in the middle of an empty road. Weapons came up, positions were taken, and suddenly the quiet countryside felt charged with potential violence. Davis looked at her questioningly, and Sarah just shook her head. We wait. They didn't have to wait long. Through her binoculars, Sarah saw it, 3 pickup trucks rolling into position about 2 kilometers ahead, exactly where Donovan had warned they'd be. She could see the distinctive shape of RPG launchers, see men positioning themselves behind cover on the roadside. It was a textbook ambush setup, and her convoy had been heading straight into it. Phantom, Viper 6. I've got visual confirmation on your intel. 3 vehicles, multiple hostiles. What's your play? The response came after a pause that felt like an eternity. Viper 6, you're going to hear shots. Don't return fire, don't move, just let me work. This will take approximately 4 minutes. Mark your time, now. Sarah checked her watch, feeling surreal about the entire situation. She was taking tactical guidance from a disgraced former Marine who wasn't supposed to be here, who was wanted by military intelligence, who was operating entirely outside any official structure. And yet, everything in Sarah's gut told her this was the right call. The first shot came 30 seconds later, the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle echoing across the landscape. Through her binoculars, Sarah watched one of the insurgents drop, his RPG clattering to the ground unfired. The others scrambled for cover, clearly panicked, trying to locate the source of the shot. They never had a chance. Methodically, precisely, Kira Donovan went to work. Sarah watched through her binoculars as the ambush dissolved before her eyes. It was like watching a master class in precision shooting, each shot calculated and deliberate, each target selected for maximum tactical impact. Kira Donovan wasn't just eliminating threats, she was dismantling the entire ambush systematically, breaking down their defensive structure piece by piece. The RPG operators went first, then the machine gunners, then the spotters and coordinators who were trying to organize a response. Within 3 minutes, the insurgents were in full retreat, abandoning their vehicles and weapons in their panic to escape the invisible death that was hunting them. For minutes, as promised, came Phantom's voice over the radio, and Sarah could hear something in her tone, not pride exactly, but a quiet satisfaction of a job done right. Viper 6, your route is clear. But I'd recommend you vary your return path. Enemy forces are learning your patterns, and they'll be waiting for you if you use the same roads twice. Sarah keyed her radio, aware that every word of this conversation was probably being recorded, probably being analyzed by intelligence officers back at base. Phantom, Viper 6. Thanks for the assist. Can we meet face to face? I'd like to thank you properly. There was a long silence, and Sarah thought maybe Donovan had simply vanished again, disappeared into whatever shadows she'd emerged from. But then the voice came back, quieter now, more cautious. Captain, the people looking for me aren't going to stop. If you're seen with me, if you're known to be in contact with me, it'll end your career just like it ended mine. I appreciate the thought, but I work better alone. I always have. The transmission ended with a click, and Sarah felt an unexpected sense of loss. She'd wanted to meet this woman, to understand what drove someone to keep fighting after everything had been taken from them. Corporal Davis lowered his binoculars, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Captain, I counted at least 8 confirmed kills in under 4 minutes. At a range that had to be, 1,000 meters? Maybe more? That's not just good shooting, that's... He trailed off, unable to find words adequate to describe what they'd just witnessed. Sarah understood his struggle. There were levels of competence in the military, from adequate to excellent to exceptional. And then there was whatever Kira Donovan was, something beyond the normal spectrum, operating at a level that seemed almost superhuman. That's someone who's dedicated their entire life to being the best at one thing, Sarah said quietly. And who's paying the price for it every day. She gave the order to resume the convoy, and they rolled past the abandoned ambush site carefully, weapons ready in case any insurgents had stayed behind. But the area was deserted except for the bodies and the abandoned weapons. Donovan had been thorough, had made sure the threat was completely neutralized before clearing them to proceed. Sarah noticed something else too. Several of the weapons had been disabled, firing pins removed or barrels damaged, ensuring they couldn't be recovered and used later. Even in combat, Donovan was thinking 3 steps ahead. The convoy completed its route without further incident, but Sarah couldn't stop thinking about that radio exchange. Phantom, the call sign fit perfectly. Kira Donovan had become exactly that, a phantom haunting the edges of the war, helping where she could but never staying long enough to be caught, never allowing herself to be pinned down or identified. How long could someone sustain that kind of existence? How long before the isolation, the constant danger, the weight of operating entirely alone began to take its toll? When they returned to base, Sarah wasn't surprised to find another summons waiting for her. Colonel Morrison wanted an immediate debrief, and the intelligence civilians were back, their expressions suggesting they already knew what had happened on the convoy route. Sarah steeled herself for another round of interrogation, another session of being asked to betray the woman who kept saving her Marines' lives. The cognitive dissonance of the situation was becoming harder to manage with each passing hour. The debriefing room was colder than before, or maybe Sarah was just feeling the chill of what she was being asked to do. Morrison didn't waste time with pleasantries. Captain Chen, we monitored your radio traffic during the convoy operation. You had direct contact with the subject again. Why didn't you immediately report her position? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Sir, with respect, she didn't provide a position. Her transmission could have come from anywhere within several kilometers. And by the time we could have mobilized a response, she would have been long gone. She's not exactly waiting around to be caught. The female civilian leaned forward, her voice sharp. But she made contact, Captain. She's reaching out to you specifically, which means she trusts you, or at least trusts you more than anyone else in this theater. That gives us an opportunity to make contact, to bring her in from the cold before something goes wrong. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Ma'am, from where I'm sitting, the only thing that's going wrong is that we're hunting someone who's on our side. Twice now she's saved Marines under my command. Twice she's provided actionable intelligence that prevented casualties. And you want me to help you capture her for the crime of being too good at her job? The room went silent. Sarah knew she'd crossed a line, knew she was letting her emotions override her professional judgment, but she couldn't help it. The fundamental injustice of the situation was eating at her, making it impossible to play the good soldier and follow orders she found morally reprehensible. Morrison's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, maybe respect, maybe just recognition that she was voicing thoughts he couldn't afford to speak aloud. Captain Chen, Morrison said slowly, his voice carrying a warning note, I understand your feelings. I do. But there's more at stake here than you realize. Sergeant Donovan isn't just operating without authorization, she's compromising ongoing operations, interfering with intelligence gathering, and creating diplomatic complications that go far beyond your pay grade or mine. He paused, seeming to wrestle with how much to reveal. 3 weeks ago, she eliminated a target that we'd been tracking for months. A high-value individual that we needed alive for interrogation. She put a bullet through his head from 800 meters, and with him died intelligence about a network that's been responsible for at least a dozen attacks on coalition forces. Sarah felt her certainty waver slightly. She hadn't considered that aspect, that Donovan's lone wolf operations might be interfering with larger strategic objectives. But even as the doubt crept in, another part of her mind was asking the obvious question. Sir, if that target was so valuable, why was he in a position where a sniper could take him out? Where was our security, our surveillance? Morrison's expression tightened. He was meeting with other insurgents, planning an operation. We had assets in place, but Donovan got there first. She saw armed hostiles and she engaged, just like she always does. No coordination, no communication, just her and her rifle making unilateral decisions that affect everyone. The male civilian spoke up, his tone condescending in a way that made Sarah's teeth grind. "Captain, you're young, and your loyalty to someone who saved your Marines is admirable. But war is more complicated than good guys and bad guys, more nuanced than simply eliminating threats as they appear. Sergeant Donovan represents an era of warfare that we've moved beyond, the lone operator, the individual hero who thinks they know better than the collective intelligence apparatus. That's not how modern military operations work." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to point out that modern military operations had left her platoon pinned down and dying until that outdated lone operator had saved their lives, but she held her tongue. These people had already made up their minds about Kira Donovan, had already decided that she was more problem than solution. Nothing Sarah said was going to change that calculus. "What are my orders, sir?" she asked Morrison, keeping her voice neutral. "Your orders are to maintain your patrol schedule and continue operating in your assigned sectors. If Donovan makes contact again, you will attempt to arrange a face-to-face meeting. Tell her anything you need to, that you want to thank her, that you have information she needs, that you can help her. Once you have a location and time, you'll report immediately and we'll have a team in position to bring her in safely." Morrison's emphasis on safely was deliberate, Sarah noted. They genuinely did want Donovan alive, which was something at least. "And if she refuses to meet?" Sarah asked, already knowing what Donovan's response would be. The woman hadn't survived this long by being careless or trusting. Morrison's expression was grim. "Then we keep tracking her pattern, keep analyzing her operations, until we can predict where she'll be and when. One way or another, Captain, this situation will be resolved. Preferably before someone gets killed because of her interference, or before she gets killed herself." Sarah was dismissed shortly after, sent back to her quarters with orders to rest and prepare for the next day's operations. But rest was impossible. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning through the moral complexities of the situation. On one hand, she understood the military's position. They couldn't have operators running around doing whatever they wanted, couldn't have the chain of command undermined by individuals who thought they knew better. Order and discipline were the foundations of military effectiveness. But on the other hand, she'd seen what Kira Donovan could do, had witnessed the lives she'd saved, had benefited directly from her intervention. Was the military really better off without her? Were Marines safer because she'd been discharged, or were they dying in situations where her skills could have made the difference? Sarah thought about that high-value target Morrison had mentioned, the one Donovan had killed instead of captured. Maybe there had been valuable intelligence lost. Or maybe that target would have escaped, would have gone on to kill more coalition forces, and Donovan had simply made the hard call in the moment. Around midnight, Sarah's radio crackled to life on the frequency Donovan had been using. She grabbed it immediately, her heart racing. "Viper 6, this is Phantom. I know they're pressuring you to help find me. I know they're putting you in an impossible position, and I'm sorry for that. You seem like a good officer, someone who cares about her Marines, and you don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess." Sarah keyed her radio, keeping her voice low. "Phantom, why are you still here? Why not just disappear, go somewhere they can't find you?" There was a long pause before Donovan responded, and when she did, her voice carried a weight that spoke of old pain and stubborn determination. "Because I'm still a Marine, Captain, even if they don't recognize that anymore. Because there are Marines out here dying in situations I could prevent, and I'm not going to hide somewhere safe while that's happening. They can hunt me, they can try to capture me, but as long as I'm still breathing and still capable, I'm going to do my job. That's what Marines do." Sarah felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Phantom, they're not going to stop. Eventually they'll find you, and when they do," Donovan cut her off, her voice suddenly harder. "Captain, I need you to understand something. I'm not running because I'm afraid of being caught. I'm running because the work isn't finished. The day I let them bring me in is the day I accept that following orders is more important than saving lives, and I'll never accept that. Never." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her guilt. She knew what she was supposed to do: report the contact immediately, provide the time and frequency, let the intelligence apparatus work on triangulating Donovan's position. It was her duty, her obligation as an officer. But she couldn't bring herself to pick up the secure phone, couldn't make herself be the instrument of Kira Donovan's capture. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next morning brought news that changed everything. Sarah was called to the operations center at 0600, where Major Peterson was waiting with a grim expression and a classified intelligence brief. "Captain, we've got a situation developing. Intel has picked up chatter about a major coordinated attack being planned against multiple forward operating bases in this region. Time frame is within the next 72 hours, but we don't have specifics on targets or methodology. All units are going to elevated alert status." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Coordinated attacks meant casualties, meant overwhelming force applied at multiple points simultaneously to stretch defensive resources thin. It was the kind of scenario that kept commanders awake at night, the kind that could turn a routine deployment into a bloodbath. "Sir, what's our posture? Are we reinforcing defensive positions, limiting patrols?" Peterson shook his head. "That's where it gets complicated. Higher wants us to continue normal operations, to avoid tipping off the enemy that we're aware of their planning. But they're also positioning quick reaction forces and arranging air support on standby. We're going to be walking a very fine line." "That's insane," Sarah said bluntly, then immediately regretted her lack of filter. But Peterson just nodded in agreement. "It is. But it's also above our pay grade, Captain. We execute the orders we're given and we keep our people as safe as we can within those parameters." He paused, then added more quietly, "I did want to mention something else. The intelligence on this attack? It's thin. Very thin. Higher is treating it as credible, but between you and me, I'm not convinced they have the full picture. Which means we need to be especially vigilant." Sarah returned to her platoon to brief them on the new alert status, watching their faces as they processed the information. These were good Marines, professionals who'd been through multiple deployments, but even experienced troops got nervous when they heard about coordinated attacks. The enemy's tactics were evolving, becoming more sophisticated, and the days of simple IED ambushes were giving way to complex operations that required significant planning and resources. "Listen up," Sarah told them, keeping her voice confident and calm. "We're going to maintain our patrol schedule, but everyone stays sharp. Buddy checks on equipment, extra ammo, eyes open at all times. We've been through worse than this, and we'll get through it again." That afternoon, as Sarah's platoon was preparing for a routine patrol, her radio crackled on Phantom's frequency. "Viper 6, this is Phantom. I need to talk to you, and I need you to listen carefully. That attack intel you received this morning? It's wrong. The targets are different, the timing is different, and if your command responds the way I think they will, Marines are going to die." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "Phantom, how do you know about our intelligence brief?" "That's classified at the highest levels. Captain, I've been watching this region for months. I know the enemy's patterns, their commanders, their tactics. The chatter your intel picked up. That's deliberate misdirection. The real attack is going to hit smaller outposts, places that don't have heavy fortifications or quick reaction force support. They're counting on you to reinforce the big bases while they hit the soft targets." Donovan's voice was urgent now, lacking the usual calm control. "I have locations, I have timelines, and I have the composition of the assault forces. But if I try to feed this through official channels, they'll dismiss it because it comes from me. I need you to trust me." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If Donovan was right, if the official intelligence was wrong, then Marines at small outposts across the region were about to be hit by overwhelming force with no support nearby. But if she acted on intelligence from a disgraced former Marine who was wanted by military command, she'd be risking her career, possibly facing the same kind of court-martial that had ended Donovan's service. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error was non-existent. "Phantom, I need more than your word. I need something concrete, something I can take to my command that will convince them to adjust defensive postures." Sarah heard Donovan exhale slowly on the other end of the transmission. Captain, I can give you grid coordinates for 3 staging areas where assault forces are gathering right now. I can tell you that the attack will commence at 0200 tomorrow morning, not 72 hours from now. I can tell you that the primary targets are Firebase Falcon, Outpost Phoenix, and Checkpoint 79. All small positions, all undermanned, all about to be overrun if somebody doesn't act. Sarah made a decision that she knew might end her career. Phantom, stand by. I'm going to Major Peterson with this. If he doesn't listen, if command dismisses it, then you and I are going to have to figure out another way to keep those Marines alive. She could hear the relief in Donovan's voice when she responded. Thank you, Captain. I know what this costs you. For what it's worth, you're doing the right thing. Sarah switched frequencies and called Major Peterson, requesting an immediate private meeting. When he arrived at the secure briefing room, his expression was questioning but not hostile. Sir, I have intelligence regarding the attack threat, but it comes from an unconventional source. Before you make any judgments, I need you to hear me out completely. Peterson folded his arms, his expression skeptical but willing to listen. Go ahead, Captain. But this better be good. Sarah laid it all out, the contact with Phantom, the warning about misdirection, the specific targets and timing that contradicted the official intelligence assessment. She watched Peterson's expression shift from skepticism to concern as she provided the details that Donovan had given her. When she finished, there was a long silence while the Major processed everything she'd told him. Captain, you understand what you're asking me to do? You want me to go to the Colonel and tell him that our entire intelligence picture is wrong, based on information from a discharged Marine who's currently wanted for operating without authorization? Sir, I'm asking you to consider the possibility that someone who's been on the ground in this region for months, who's been tracking enemy movements independently, might have insights that our intelligence apparatus is missing. If Phantom is right and we do nothing, we're going to lose good Marines tomorrow morning. If she's wrong, the worst that happens is we reinforce some outposts unnecessarily. Sarah paused, then added, and sir, she was right about the ambush on my convoy. She was right about the attack that pinned down my platoon. Her track record is perfect so far. Peterson rubbed his face tiredly. All right. I'll take it to Morrison, but I can't promise he'll listen. The Colonel has been under significant pressure from higher headquarters about this Donovan situation, and admitting that she has better intelligence than our entire intelligence apparatus isn't going to sit well with anyone above the pay grade of Major. He stood up, then paused at the door. Captain, if this goes wrong, if those outposts aren't hit and we've reallocated resources based on bad information, you and I are both going to be in serious trouble. Are you prepared for that? Sarah met his eyes steadily. Sir, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep Marines alive. If that means ending my career, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. Peterson nodded slowly, something like respect showing in his expression. That's the answer I was hoping for. Give me an hour, and stay by your radio. One way or another, we'll have a decision. The next hour was one of the longest of Sarah's life. She paced her quarters, running through scenarios in her mind, second-guessing her decision to trust Kira Donovan with the lives of Marines she'd never met. What if this was wrong? What if Phantom's intelligence was compromised, or worse, what if Donovan had somehow been turned, was feeding false information to create chaos? Sarah didn't believe that, couldn't believe it given everything she'd seen, but the doubt gnawed at her nonetheless. Her radio finally crackled to life. Viper 6, this is Peterson. Report to the operations center immediately. The Major's tone gave nothing away, and Sarah felt her stomach drop as she hurried across the base. When she entered the operations center, she found not just Peterson and Morrison, but the 2 intelligence civilians and several other senior officers she didn't recognize. The atmosphere was tense, charged with the kind of energy that preceded major decisions. Morrison spoke first, his voice clipped and professional. Captain Chen, Major Peterson has briefed me on your intelligence source and the information you've received. I've consulted with intelligence assets and with higher headquarters. The consensus is that while we cannot officially acknowledge or act on intelligence from Sergeant Donovan, we also cannot ignore the potential that our current threat assessment may be incomplete. He paused, and Sarah could see the political calculation happening behind his eyes. Therefore, I'm authorizing enhanced defensive postures at Firebase Falcon, Outpost Phoenix, and Checkpoint 79, effective immediately. We'll position quick reaction forces for rapid response to those locations, and we'll have air assets on standby. Relief flooded through Sarah, but Morrison wasn't finished. However, I want to be absolutely clear, Captain. This is not an endorsement of your source or her methods. If this intelligence proves incorrect, if we've reallocated resources based on false information, there will be consequences for everyone in this chain. And if Sergeant Donovan makes contact again, you will immediately report it so that we can attempt to bring her in. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir, Sarah responded, feeling the weight of what she'd set in motion. Morrison dismissed everyone except Sarah and the female intelligence civilian, who'd remained silent throughout the briefing. When the room was empty, the civilian spoke for the first time that day. Captain Chen, I want you to understand something. Kira Donovan was the best we ever trained, possibly the best sniper the military has produced in a generation. But she's also unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous, not to our enemies, but to the very structure that allows our military to function. If her intelligence is correct, if those outposts are hit exactly as she predicted, it's going to raise very uncomfortable questions about how a discharged former Marine has better situational awareness than our entire intelligence network. Sarah held the woman's gaze. Ma'am, with respect, maybe those are questions that need to be raised. Maybe we should be asking why someone operating alone, without support or resources, can see threats that we're missing with all our technology and personnel. The civilian's expression hardened. Careful, Captain. That kind of thinking is what got Donovan discharged in the first place. The military doesn't need rogue operators who think they're smarter than everyone else. It needs soldiers who follow orders and trust the system. Even when the system is wrong? Sarah asked quietly. The civilian didn't answer, just turned and left the room, leaving Sarah alone with the knowledge that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd chosen Kira Donovan's word over official intelligence, had bet her career and potentially the lives of other Marines on the judgment of a woman she'd never even met face to face. Now all she could do was wait and see if that trust was justified. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness as 0200 approached. Sarah had tried to sleep but found it impossible, her mind racing through all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. She'd positioned herself in the operations center, ostensibly to monitor the situation but really because she couldn't bear to be anywhere else when the moment of truth arrived. Major Peterson was there too, along with a skeleton crew of radio operators and intelligence analysts. Nobody spoke much. They all knew what was at stake. At 0130, Sarah's personal radio crackled on Phantom's frequency. Viper 6, this is Phantom. I'm in position overlooking Firebase Falcon. I can see movement in the tree line approximately 400 meters from their perimeter. Multiple vehicles, maybe 30 to 40 personnel staging for assault. They'll move at 0200 exactly. Sarah keyed her radio carefully, aware that everyone in the operations center was now listening. Phantom, can you provide grid coordinates? Donovan rattled off precise coordinates, which Sarah immediately relayed to the operations center staff. Within seconds, surveillance assets were being repositioned, drone feeds were being pulled up on monitors, and sure enough, there they were, enemy forces in significant numbers, exactly where Phantom had said they'd be. Morrison, who'd been monitoring from his office, came striding into the operations center, his expression a mixture of vindication and concern. Captain Chen, tell your source that we have visual confirmation. Tell her to stand by and do not engage unless absolutely necessary. We're scrambling air support now. Sarah relayed the message, and Donovan's response came back immediately. Viper 6, understood. But you should know that Outpost Phoenix and Checkpoint 79 are also being staged on right now. The attacks are coordinated, designed to hit simultaneously and overwhelm response capabilities. You don't have enough air assets to cover all three locations at once. The tactical reality of what Donovan was saying hit Sarah like a physical blow. Even with the warning, even with forces repositioned, they were still going to be stretched thin. Morrison had heard the transmission and was already on the command net, issuing rapid-fire orders to reposition quick reaction forces and coordinate with air support. But Sarah could see the calculations happening on his face, could see him realizing the same thing Donovan already knew: they couldn't be everywhere at once. Someone was going to be hanging in the wind when those attacks kicked off, and there was no good solution. Viper 6, came Phantom's voice again, quieter now but carrying absolute certainty. I can cover Outpost Phoenix. It's the smallest position, most vulnerable, and closest to my current location. If you can get air support to Falcon and 7-9, I'll make sure Phoenix holds. Sarah looked at Morrison, who was staring at the tactical display with the expression of a man being forced to make an impossible choice. Finally, he grabbed a radio and spoke directly. Phantom, this is Colonel Morrison. If you engage at Outpost Phoenix, you're putting yourself at extreme risk. That position doesn't have the resources to extract you if things go wrong, and we won't be able to provide support. There was a pause, and when Donovan responded, Sarah could hear the ghost of a smile in her voice. Colonel, with all due respect, I've been at extreme risk for 8 months now. It's kind of my specialty. Just keep those Marines at Falcon and 7-9 alive, and I'll handle Phoenix. At precisely 0200, all 3 positions came under attack simultaneously. Sarah watched the chaos unfold across multiple screens and radio frequencies, her heart in her throat as she tracked the developing situations. Firebase Falcon took heavy mortar fire and a ground assault from the east, but the reinforced garrison and rapid air support response turned the tide within 20 minutes. Checkpoint 79 faced a similar assault, and again, the combination of warning and resources meant the defenders were able to hold their ground with minimal casualties. But Outpost Phoenix was different. The attack there was more concentrated, more vicious, because the enemy had correctly identified it as the most vulnerable target. Sarah listened to the frantic radio traffic as the 17 Marines at Phoenix fought desperately against overwhelming odds. And then, cutting through the chaos like a surgical instrument, came the distinctive crack of Phantom's rifle. Sarah couldn't see what was happening, could only imagine it based on the radio reports, but the pattern was clear. Every time the enemy was about to breach the perimeter, every time it looked like the defenders would be overrun, another insurgent commander or machine gunner would drop from an impossible shot. Jesus Christ, one of the intelligence analysts breathed, watching infrared drone footage that had finally been repositioned to cover Phoenix. She's hitting targets from over 1,000 meters out, in the dark, with hostile fire everywhere. How is that even possible? Sarah didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure anyone did. What Kira Donovan was doing went beyond training, beyond skill, into some realm of pure instinct and ability that couldn't be taught or replicated. The battle at Outpost Phoenix lasted 43 minutes, and when it was over, the enemy had been repelled with heavy casualties on their side and only minor injuries among the defenders. The Marines at Phoenix were baffled, reporting that at least 12 enemy combatants had been eliminated by an unknown sniper who'd provided overwatch throughout the engagement. They wanted to know who their guardian angel was, wanted to thank whoever had saved their lives. Morrison ordered them to secure their position and await further orders, his expression unreadable as he processed what had just happened. Sarah tried to raise Phantom on the radio, her hands shaking slightly as she keyed the microphone. Phantom, Viper 6. Status report. Are you okay? The silence stretched out, and Sarah felt fear grip her chest. Had Donovan been hit? Had she pushed her luck too far, stayed in position too long, finally made the mistake that would end everything? Then, finally, the radio crackled to life. Viper 6, Phantom. I'm clear and moving to secondary position. All 3 objectives held with minimal friendly casualties. Tell those Marines at Phoenix they fought like hell tonight. They should be proud. The aftermath of the coordinated attacks brought a storm of activity to the base. Intelligence analysts were scrambling to understand how they'd missed the threat, how a lone operator had identified the real target set when their entire apparatus had been fooled by misdirection. Senior officers were flying in for debriefings, and Sarah knew that her role in the night's events was going to come under intense scrutiny. She'd been right, but being right when you'd violated protocol was sometimes worse than being wrong while following orders. Morrison summoned her to his office at 0800, and Sarah prepared herself for whatever consequences were coming. But when she entered, she found the colonel looking more tired than angry, more thoughtful than accusatory. "Captain Chen, sit down. We need to talk about what happens next." Sarah took a seat, keeping her back straight and her expression neutral. "Sir, I take full responsibility for my actions. I chose to trust intelligence from an unauthorized source, and I'm prepared to accept whatever consequences that entails." Morrison waved a hand dismissively. "Captain, you saved at least 30 Marines last night, probably more. The brass can't punish you for that without looking like complete idiots, and they know it. No, the problem we have is different. The problem is that Sergeant Kira Donovan just proved that she's more valuable operating outside the system than anyone we have operating inside it. And that's a truth that a lot of very senior people are extremely uncomfortable acknowledging." He leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah carefully. "I've been authorized to make Donovan an offer. Full reinstatement of rank, all benefits restored, complete clearing of her record. In exchange, she comes in from the cold, submits to command authority, and operates within the proper channels. I'm told to use whatever leverage necessary to make this happen, and the leverage they're suggesting is you. They think she trusts you, that you might be able to convince her when official channels have failed." Sarah felt her stomach twist. "Sir, I don't think Sergeant Donovan is going to accept that offer. She didn't refuse to follow orders because she was trying to be difficult. She refused because she genuinely believes that sometimes orders are wrong, and that saving lives is more important than maintaining the chain of command. Asking her to come back and promise to always follow orders is asking her to become someone she's not." Morrison nodded slowly. "I know. But I have to make the offer anyway. The question is, will you help me?" Sarah thought about it, thought about everything she'd learned about Kira Donovan over the past few days. The woman was a ghost, a phantom, someone who'd chosen to operate in the shadows rather than compromise her principles. Bringing her back into the official structure might be impossible, might even be wrong. But Sarah also knew that what Donovan was doing was unsustainable. Eventually, operating alone would get her killed. Eventually, her luck would run out. "I'll try, sir. But I'm not making any promises." Sarah spent the next hour trying to raise Phantom on the radio, using every frequency and call sign she could think of. Finally, as the sun was climbing toward noon, Donovan responded. "Viper 6, Phantom. I assume Command wants to talk to me about last night. Tell them thanks but no thanks. I'm good where I am." Sarah took a deep breath. "Phantom, they're offering full reinstatement. Everything you lost, they'll give it back. You could come home." There was a long pause, and when Donovan spoke again, her voice carried a sadness that made Sarah's chest ache. "Captain, that's not my home anymore. Maybe it never really was. I was always better at the fighting than the following, better at the doing than the obeying. The Corps needs people like you, people who can balance the mission with the rules, who can work within the system while still caring about the people they lead. But it also needs people like me, even if it doesn't want to admit it. People who operate in the gaps, who do the things that official channels can't or won't do." Sarah found herself nodding even though Donovan couldn't see her. "So what happens now? You just keep ghosting around the desert, saving Marines who don't even know you exist?" Donovan's response came with a hint of that smile Sarah could now recognize in her voice. "That's exactly what I do, Captain. And maybe someday, when this war is over and I'm too old and broken to hold a rifle steady, I'll come home for real. But until then, I've got work to do. Marines to protect. Lives to save. It's what I'm good at, and it's what I'm going to keep doing, with or without permission." The transmission ended, and Sarah sat in silence for a moment, processing what she'd heard. Then she returned to Morrison's office and delivered the news. The colonel took it with a resigned expression, as if he'd expected nothing different. "Well, Captain, I suppose that's that. Command won't be happy, but they'll have to learn to live with it. Sergeant Donovan has made her choice, and I don't think anyone's going to change her mind." Over the following weeks, Sarah continued her patrols, continued leading her Marines through the dangerous landscape of Iraq. And sometimes, when situations got desperate, when her people were pinned down or facing overwhelming odds, she'd hear that distinctive crack echo across the desert. She'd see enemy positions go silent, see threats eliminated by shots that shouldn't have been possible. And she'd know that somewhere out there, hidden in the urban sprawl or perched on some distant rooftop, Kira Donovan was still fighting. Still protecting. Still being the ghost that haunted America's enemies and saved its sons and daughters. The Marines in Sarah's platoon developed a tradition. Whenever they made it through a particularly hairy situation, whenever they survived something that should have killed them, they'd pour out a little water from their canteens onto the Iraqi sand. It was their way of honoring the guardian angel they couldn't see, the phantom sniper who watched over them from the shadows. They never spoke her name aloud, never officially acknowledged her existence. But they knew. And they were grateful. Sarah never heard from Kira Donovan again directly. But she'd sometimes catch reports of unexplained enemy casualties, of ambushes that failed mysteriously, of high-value targets eliminated by unknown shooters. And she'd smile, knowing that somewhere out there, a discharged Marine was still serving, still fighting, still refusing to let her people die when she had the power to prevent it. The brass could hunt her, could want her brought in, could be uncomfortable with her existence. But they couldn't stop her. And deep down, Sarah suspected, they didn't really want to. Because every commander knew the truth, even if they couldn't say it out loud, sometimes the military needed people who were willing to disobey orders to do what was right. Years later, after Sarah had returned home, after she'd been promoted and had eventually retired with honor, she received an unmarked package at her home. Inside was a single playing card, the ace of spades, and a handwritten note that said simply, "Thanks for trusting me. Stay safe. K.D." Sarah put the card in a frame and hung it in her study, a reminder of the ghost sniper who'd saved her life, who'd shown her that courage sometimes meant standing alone, and that being a Marine wasn't about the uniform or the rank. It was about the mission, the purpose, the unwavering commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And somewhere in the world, Sarah liked to imagine, Kira Donovan was still out there. Still watching. Still protecting. Still defying orders to save the lives of those who'd never know her name. A phantom, a ghost, a guardian angel with a rifle. The greatest sniper the Marines had ever produced, and the one they'd been foolish enough to let go. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.